Alright, before moving forward, let's do a collection of stuff that we had. For example, a bunch of other, missions of the past. This is actually one of my favorite, but also one of the more challenging.
My dad, the virtue of invention. In life, I had no equal among elven smiths and artists.
Apparently, not just of Batman, but apparently, ever since that fucking first trailer of Zelda Breath of the Wild came out, every single game that included a bow and arrow wanted to do the whole mechanic of slow-mo while you're aiming, while in mid-jump.
Yep.
So there's also one in this game too. Your challenge in here is to, kill all of the archers using the Shadow Strike one in midair, and before time runs out. Keep in mind, you have to do this in a specific sequence because you still need to replenish your Elven Shot, and you need to do it before time runs out, jumping from building to building. So again, there's a method, there's an intended way to do it, and there's a bit of try and error, but it's immensely satisfying to finally, unlocking it as a kind of a puzzle. There we go. I don't really use that much of the technique of, firing in midair, but sure, I get it, but it's useful and why they wanted to put it there. As also to mention, basically, since these missions are tied to a specific technique, they will not be available until you've actually actually unlocked via leveling up. As such, for convenience sakes, I will leave most of them towards the end of the game, since by that point I will have unlocked most of what I need, so it will be much of an easier case to do them in one go. I'm just doing most of these because, again, they are relatively early, they are tied to what's going on, and they provide decent enough reward that help me, going forward.
Neat.
3 more.
They definitely have upped the animations on, the moves you can do.
Mm-hmm. And again, just like in the previous game, if you want to make sure to inflict a final blow that's decisive with decapitation, the Shadow Strike is the one to go, but you have to make sure that in case of a captain, it is actually the last one that you do, because otherwise you will not be able to, decapitate him, just inflict a normal blow.
So since their game... Okay, so since they debuted from games, Talion and Kelm Brimmore for Smash... I could maybe see it.
Again, they're Warner Bros. Property. Let them be multiverses instead.
Oh, actually, yeah, they could show up in multiverses, and...
Again, originally, apparently Gandalf was supposed to be in the initial roster, but that was the point where Warner Bros. Was having a bit of a trouble, but now that apparently they have their right issue resolved with the Embracer group, they probably should be able to work that out. We'll have to see when the game eventually resurfaces the year after we're recording this.
Now, despite what outcry may have come when these games were first released, how do the fan base overall feel about this duology nowadays?
The general consensus is they're immensely fun to play, but they could have been better in terms of stories and some of the minor themes.
So would you say that, say, Talion and Kelm Brimmore have, fan support in regards to showing up in other stuff?
The same way Starkiller from the Force Unleashed duology would have, yes.
Oh, that's nice. Have we seen Shelob's human form show up in anything else?
No.
Okay, I have to wonder, did the developers try to play off Shelob's human form as we decided to be progressive and keep in mind this for people who are arachnophobic? Therefore, we will have Shelob be shown off in this
I'm gonna say no, because the game is chock full of normal spiders anyway, constantly.
So then why do it with Shelob specifically then?
Because again, just wait until we solve our side quest, Jova. It will become a bit more clear as it happens.
Okay.
Alright, let's showcase when a normal book actually kills me, because this is gonna start a mini story arc.
You talk? Suppose that makes me a talk killer. No. Talk slayer! I quite like the sound of that.
I'll admit, I do like games that give enemies, these little cutscenes that play after they kill you.
And guess what? Now, because he said this, now this enemy is gonna get the title of Tark's Lair.
Which means...
Well, not much. In more cases, no, you know how the orcs gain a title like, say, Push Cream to the Unclean, or, Norg the Mighty. In this case, he literally gains instead the title, the Tark Slayer, because he said so in that dialogue. That's cute.
So what happens
I'm not a
so what
real
ha-
Tark Slayer.
So what if somebody else kills you? Do they also get the title of Tark
Vic,
Slayer?
it's a possibility. It's not an always guaranteed, but it's something that can happen.
Well, you mentioned a quest. I wonder, can you actually spawn a side quest by having a mook kill you?
Well, not as a mainline type of side quest, but like I said, the Nemesis system allows to create this mini story arc of betrayal, vengeance, being killed, getting revenge on who you killed, maybe something else pops up in the meantime. It's literally a story that gets created via RNG method and accidents that do happen. So let's get our revenge right now on this guy, because I don't like leaving this guy in business for the time being. Oh, god damn it.
I was actually going to ask if, people who killed you, do they get any special dialogue if they see you back from the dead?
Yes, sometimes, yes. Like, for example, say, oh, you're supposed to be dead, or no, I'm the one that's supposed to be killing you for this case. Or if you manage to reduce this guy in at the last stand that gives a special dialogue, it will say, oh, I suppose that makes you the Tark Slayer's Slayer.
You don't seem to get it. We've been down this road before. I'm the Tark Slayer. That means I kill Tarks, and you're a Tark.
Do you not recognize me, my dude?
Skills. Allow me to retaliate via headshot. Goodbye.
Damn. Point blank.
But it
I am the
revenge.
Tark. So I am the Tark killer.
And at least with this, we'll not actually see him again.
So do you get any special rewards from doing a revenge kill as the game
Only
market?
in a specific occasion, but it's a lot of parts from now, so we'll have to get there eventually.
That man
Alright,
is on
next
fire
target.
over there.
Ignore that. Another Gondorian coin.
And he's had a vendetta against Minas Ithil ever
I
since.
do wish that they added subtitles for these
Yeah, I don't
voiceovers.
understand why they didn't.
Because they have subtitles almost everywhere else, too.
It feels like it's a thing only for these side things, because remember, even the Shelob memory reconstruction doesn't have one.
Maybe these side things were last-minute additions and they didn't have
Not
time
really,
to program
because when you
subtitles.
cut back to the word for the banter that Talion can tend to have in regards to what they discover, like the object or the memory, those are subtitled. So it's something like this side menu was not coded with subs on its own.
Sucks to be a deaf person in that regard. Also, I see that people on fire leave fire trails.
But yeah, they were they were actually talking about Earnur, the last of the official kings of Gondor as Tuminorian, that fought the Witch King, essentially Aragorn's ancestor. That character is also gonna be talked about in the Gollum game, believe it or not.
The orcs are obsessed with rings, more so than coins or jewelry of equal value. They snatch them from prisoners immediately, and what happens to these rings is anyone's guess. We rarely find orcs actually wearing them.
A fine ring, but I gather it's an ordinary one.
Hey, it's green. It's got some value.
Actually, what is stopping us from just making yet another ring instead of playing Errand Boy for Shelob?
Because in that one, Celebrimbor infused a lot of his power. We cannot really replicate that, and it's best if we
Joe, if it was simple as I'm going to make this ring that's even more
Thor would have
powerful,
done
then
already another one, yeah.
then there'd be no story.
True.
The idea behind it, in case you need to wonder about the themes, is to preserve the status quo. The major theme of Lord of the Rings, in case you don't know, is decadence. What was from the past is decaying, and Sauron is one of the members of the Old Guard desperately being attached to wanting to preserve the power that he conquered, while instead people like the elves just want to retire, to the east, to the west.
So what you're telling me is that Sauron is the ultimate evil boomer.
Kinda, in a sense. Much like in a lot of other stories, it's about change. how much do we want to resist to it, and how much that is a good or a bad thing. Outside of the traditional blue, black and white morality, Tolkien was essentially presenting that theme in his stories, and letting you decide how much do you wanted to value about it. If it was a case of how much the old traditions were still relevant and how much new things were needed to be introduced.
Honestly, Sauron's one of the interesting classic bad guys of media, in the sense, like, going strictly off of the movies, we never really do actually get to truly directly fight him. We see him mainly fought in flashbacks. For the most of the time, he's just a giant tower with an eye.
The entire goal is to prevent him to come back. Also, dragon scale. That's pretty cute.
Which is funny because in the books, he kind of did sort of come back to be fought. Kinda?
No, not really. Again, the entire...
Or was that just a projection of him?
No, not even that. That was one of the scrapped concepts that was supposed to happen towards the end of Return of the King, and it's something that is happening in these games, where Sauron is assuming a temporary physical form via one ways or another, and but it's not as powerful because he doesn't possess the ring.
Oh, I thought that was a thing from the book that got changed
happened. Okay,
the
the closest you can tell is the Hobbit, where he assumed the form of a necromancer, but was fought by the White Council in the appendix and defeated there.
In the appendix. Well, okay. I guess to be fair, I'm guessing that when The Hobbit was written, Sauron originally wasn't a big deal.
When The Hobbit was written, the focus entirely was about Bilbo's journey and seeing entirely from his perspective. As such, there are these moments where Gandalf just takes and leaves, and we never see him again for, a good chunk of the story, until the story decides to say that Gandalf, was in the proximity of Bilbo, so they actually met again. The appendix serves to fill in the gaps and tell he was doing this, and conveniently that connects to the narrative of Lord of the Rings.
I love that. In the context of the books, it's like, hey, guys, this little side villain we mentioned in The Hobbit? Yeah, it turns out he's actually the big bad of all things Lord of the Rings.
Think about this, Jova. It's kind of like equivalent to having a vanilla story and then a DLC episode that tells about filling in the gaps. That's kind of what happened.
Oh, again, I'm sure this video game is just as Tolkien would have imagined in that regard.
Speaking of hobbits. To be fair, it's not just halflings. Remember, also both humans and dwarves also love the pipe weed.
Yeah.
Remind me.
Gandalf couldn't get enough of that.
Remind me, what year did Tolkien die?
Oof, I think
it was
in
the 1970s.
Yeah,
Let me check.
Not too long ago, but not even.
Well, by the 1970s,
1973.
Okay, by that point, technically video games existed, but they were all still in the primordial ooze, basically.
I get what you mean, Pedro, but it's like that meme that people says that Abraham Lincoln could have sent a fax to a samurai. Like technically could have happened, but it would have felt a bit surreal.
Yeah.
Wow. So yes, Tolkien technically was alive to the point where I guess he could at least know what video games were on his
to his son Christopher about having a video game.
I mean,
Shelob is a sexy beach.
All coming together.
Considering his work and the fact that by that point he would have been like a super old man, he probably would have gone full Miyazaki and talk about why aren't kids playing in the streets like normal people and shit. Blah, blah, blah.
If I recall correctly, one of his last books that talks about letters to Tolkien, where it's essentially a giant Q&A session, he does answer a couple of questions in regards to hypothetical scenarios, like what would have happened if Gandalf took the ring instead. But I will answer those after the story is over, because thematically they would make more sense then. Also, just to note, regarding the artifacts, it's super cool the fact that the devs created these full 3D models that are not just, very low poly, but instead you can tell that they're fully rendered even inside, where you cannot really see.
I was wondering if you can actually interact with some of these items by unraveling.
No, you can just rotate the camera to see them in all their full glory. It's kind of like a model viewer. You can even zoom in or out if you want.
It is a good attention to detail, though, that you can even potentially read some of the stuff inside of that letter. That being said, again, the lack of subtitles is baffling, because if I recall correctly, the previous game even had text that you could read in regards to...
Yes, because it had on the right, if you forgot that that kind of column that talk about the item description, and when you unlock the memory, the transcript of the memory that was being told. I don't know why. Hold on.
I know the heart of my people, so I know what they say.
Oh, Talion still cares despite being a reject from his own state.
I've always said Italian for a second.
I wonder if the elves
Thinking, well, what happened to you?
For even their common containers.
I don't really, like I said, I don't really think there was too much of a parallel between cultures when it came to the main players of the Tolkien state. But, well, to be fair, yes, all the eastern states of the corrupted men by Sauron are a representation of the eastern state of the real world, because, again, much like Christ Apple View is Tolkien as a, you know, a British white guy from the early 1900s, you know, was inevitable to fall into that kind of pit of fear, you know, and potential unknown of those cultures. Especially since he fought in World War I, where the last remnants of the Turkish Empire were kind of ruthless overall. So, also in the meantime, I got also, yeah, there was also a loot that, if I recall correctly, I did not showcase before. This one, thankfully, does not have an X attached to it, because the people who made it remember that it's supposed to be a fucking instrument, and not an instrument of death.
When all around us lies in shadow, a simple folk song or pleasing dance was a ray of sunshine. I wonder if such music will ever be heard again.
It reminds me of that episode of the Zygon invasion of Doctor Who, where Peter Capaldi chose out two factions that want to go at war and said, you know, just to make an example, who's gonna make the music if, you know, if everything is destroyed.
I mean, you've got to do similar. I haven't seen the full two-parter. That all I see was the that bit at near the end.
The game show, that's the part of it everyone remembers. It's very powerful, and hey, even Clara is not as insufferable as normal. Wow.
Oh.
This mace is far older than what we usually find on the battlefield.
I doubt the orc.
So it's gonna break if you use it once.
But no, thankfully we're not using, you know, Breath of the Wild logic.
How is the weapon?
More like Break of the Wild.
Hey Pedro, how is the weapon system in Tears of the Fallen Kingdom?
It's just Tears of the Kingdom, but it's much better because okay, say you have a stick. Oh, sorry. Do you have maybe say something?
Continue, Pedro. Feel free to go on.
Say you have a stick, right? Obviously, that shit doesn't have much durability. It's okay. Just mesh it with a rock. There you go. Now you have a powerful weapon, and it is durability. And yeah. So basically, if the limit is your creativity. Basically, you can build weapons out of whatever's around you, and if you're creative, you can just create yourself a really good durable weapon that hurts a lot. And when it starts eventually getting to the point where it might break, well, are there any other sticks and blocks around? Basically, it's much easier to get equipped with a powerful weapon in this game compared to Breath of the Wild.
And
well, I thought that the point of contention was the fact that, you know, using powerful weapon felt a waste because their durability meant that you have so much until, you know...
True, but my point is that it's much easier to replace that broken weapon.
Okay. I was thinking more about unique objects, because it's interestingly enough, in pure contrast, for the reason that I do wonder, because that was clearly something that was decided in, you know, in business reunions and stuff like that. Elden Ring completely does away with weapon durability. It has
and I love it for it.
Oh, I love it too, but I do wonder when the discussion came in, because Midwebs and Shira are going through Dark Souls 2, and that one is infamous also for having a bad durability system.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you think maybe the stigma of Breath of the Wild is what got them to finally change their tune.
Who knows?
It's also... No, to be fair, I am enjoying Tears of the Kingdom quite a lot more than I did Breath of the Wild. So, yeah. Like
because Ganon is so handsome.
Like I did stop completely to play like put it on complete pause to play Final Fantasy 16 because I love that game to death. So I just like but eventually I'll get back to it. Because the story.
simple...
I'm sorry.
Go on.
No, go on.
No, go on.
Okay. Because the story in the new game is good. It's definitely a big improvement over the Part of the Wild story, but it still doesn't hold a candle to 16. So.
But yeah, as you can see, all these artifacts that we got that were scattered from Minas Ithil includes even stuff like a typical Gondorian crown, or in this case an ornament lamp that was done by the elves. When it's always something crafted by the elves, you can assure that Celebrimbor will always say something about it. Oh, it's not really as good as I would have made. Alright, time for another memory of Shelob.
So, Tio, I'm curious. The different regions in this world, do they have a lot of variety to them? And if so, what's your favorite level gameplay?
My favorite, that's an interesting one, because I tend to, well, it's definitely one we haven't seen yet, but they go in terms of theme of something that the thought process that you will see maybe in a Mario game, as in one it's a giant cave, one is about, the city of Minas Ithil, one resembles a more grassy field, another, instead a fire theme level, another an ice theme level, something like that. But again, I tend to like them overall. There are ones that really are a bit less like than others, but I will mention when I need to.
So if I didn't know better, I thought I saw Shelob on what looked like Sauron's bed there.
Again, Drova, when we get the entire cutscene, you will see. This is a plate from either Rune or Harad, again, other kingdom of men of the East. The ones that I distinctly remember are, like I said, Harad, which represent Persia and by extension also the, Arabian, states. Rune, which instead I think represents I think it's a combination of also Persia and Mongolia, and Khand, which represent traditional China or Mongolia, but that one is talked very briefly about.
By reading the history and peoples of Gondor,
The big epic music is interrupted by saying I gotta read a book.
Shut up, you have to read or something, Liz.
Sure, I would love to read something. How about some subtitles, Gabe?
It's like that scene in Berserk where one of the villains, again, not going to actual spoiler, literally beats someone in the head with the left part of a book, the small one.
It's this game.
You know what they say? Knowledge literally is power.
Gondor's history. Triumph in one chapter, despair in the next.
Concern yourself with the chapter yet unwritten.
Last Overlord beat me after death, if he did.
I flew from ruin and made a home for myself in the caves. I was here before the first stone of Barad-dûr, and I will survive its fall. I've come to enjoy the darkness. My brood has
It really feels just
It's inconsistent, especially because in movies, when you watch subtitles in movies, they have subtitles for the songs. In fact, if you're watching the closed captions for hard of hearing people, they even put in a little musical note every time there's a song so that the deaf people know it's a song, right? Why not do that for games too? Like,
I really don't know what specific department of the game development decides about that. I don't know.
She wishes an empire of her own.
I sense she has had her fill of empire building.
Okay. So Shelob liked to play Civilization, I see.
Just one more turn.
I mean, I'll give Last of Us Part 2 some credit. At least when Ellie's singing, they actually put in subtitles for that shit.
I don't know why some media is adverse to, subtitling
like I said, it
song
feels
lyrics.
really random.
Yeah.
Our patrols found this fossilized squid beak.
This is a fossil of a creature that is very hinted to be of the same species of the Watcher in the Lake, that tentacle monster that was outside of the mines of Moria.
Interesting. For a moment, I was about to wonder if it was oop art.
This world hides horrors far worse than the orcs.
For those who don't know, Upard is an out-of-place artifact.
This must have been.
It's the one where the archetype of Chronomalies from Yu-Gi-Oh is based on.
Oh, hello. Another
This one
Gondorian.
is
Gondor's
parchment.
preferred order of battle with variations is a chart
Well,
It's
the
hard
chart
to make-
says.
from the infantry to the cooks and teamsters in the rear. Whenever I study it, I'm amazed at what it takes to send an army to war. Details down to the number of cobblers and farriers for each column of soldiers. Such matters of supply seem mundane until you're under siege, desperately fighting on quarter rations. Then you're eager to pay attention to logistics.
The structure
Wait,
of the
was that John DiMaggio I heard in the background?
No, it's clear someone else because he's not in the cast
The
list.
moment they set foot in Gondor.
And even for the Mook Orc, all of the ones that actually got used are credited properly.
That would have been fun. That
Is
would,
To
sorry.
Grog
A
is
bottle
on.
of grog. Go on.
That would have been funny. Marcus Phoenix travels back in time to help Aragorn and his troops.
It's funny that you said, because that's connected to something that I wanted to mention. That person that I talked about when the bard orc showed up, Michael Forgree, I forgot what exactly the pronunciation of his last name is, unfortunately, was also credited as an executive producer and miscellaneous crews for a couple of games that Microsoft did back in the day. Specifically, the first Fable, Perfect Dark Zero, and Gears of War 2. I don't know what kind of extent his influence was outside of maybe just, give money to finance the project, but it was actually properly created for those. So it's interesting that they jumped onto these.
I chose the form of a spider because I wanted to walk the web of fate.
Like I said, he was an accomplished, musician with his own band, and unfortunately he passed away in 2016 while this game was still in development. So there is something attached also to that when it comes to talk about the history of this game, but it's not there yet. See, one other reason why subtitles will be appreciated, because a lot of times Shelob just whispers, her stuff
Yeah, that too.
instead of just telling. I get it; it's in character; it's perfectly reasonable to do, but subs will help.
I mean, it's still technically better than Balan Wonderworld, but at the very least, it's just like.
Well, Pedro.
Why do you need sub when you can get Crazy Farmer dancing like there's no tomorrow?
I kid you not, Tio. The final cutscene, which is voiced, has no subtitles.
See, the problem too is that game has a fictional language. So, without subtitles, how the hell are we supposed to understand what the fuck the characters are saying?
Well, again,
Yeah, I mean,
a
it's-
good game
it's,
design will make sure that the cutscene manages to convey what you need and keep the fictional language mysterious, so you don't really need to actually be immersed, and instead
True.
it keeps the mystery. Like I said, that's the entire logic behind the fictional language used for the lyrics in the songs that Keisho Kabe uses.
Yeah.
for
It's even
problem
worse
is that-
than in. It's even
problem
worse
is
than in that BBC soap opera El Dorado, where they have characters speaking foreign languages with no subtitles.
Yes,
Like,
Noah?
okay, look, the main problem is not only has that not been the case, but the first cutscene actually did include subtitles
Yeah.
for the fictional language. The thing is, for the most part, you only hear the fictional language for when Balan is speaking, when you hear the songs when they're not done in their English version, and the final cutscene with Balan.
Yeah.
It's not even like we hear the other characters speak this language, so
It's
you'd
not
be forgiven.
consistent, that's
Yeah,
the point.
that's the most baffling thing. They subtitle every bit of the fictional language except for the final cutscene. I'm genuinely convinced it was a mistake, because it doesn't even. It definitely doesn't feel like an intentional choice. It really feels like they just made a mistake.
Anyway, collecting all the Ithil and solving the riddle of this gives us the Bright Lord's cloak instead. Like I said, the cloak determines the stealth gauge, which is essentially the kind of range in which enemies can spot you or not. The higher, obviously, the better.
You know, I could see an interesting story arc coming from this. Like, the more items of his armor you collect, the more you become like Helen Brimmore, and it becomes a cautionary tale to not go down the same path he did.
It's really just perks when it comes to gameplay, because even the other armor sets that you do get, weapon armor sets that you get, are attached to other parts of Mordor. For example, attached to the tribes, because, for example, there's a terror set, the terror tribe set, one about Marauder and stuff like that. That are themed about them, and they grant different bonuses. Again, it uses the logic of looting materials that's similar to looter shooters. It even has the whole rare with yellow, or big rare with orange, and ultra rare with purple.
I assume that with the title of legendary, that the legendaries would be the best of.
Ideally, yes, better stats and better perk bonuses.
Of course, those are the ones passed down from Helen Brimmore.
Well, there's only one. That's only one of the title sets that you can get. Again, more in due time. In the meantime, see you for the next part, where we continue trying to save Minas Ithil from its impending doom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ta-ta.